I'm just going to start the show. Um, Welcome to Trombone Is Enough. My name is John Covelli, and I'm pleased to have for my first episode of 2024, Rebecca Patterson.
Hey.
Say hello. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Do you prefer Becca?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Becca or Rebecca is totally cool. Yeah.
Okay. So I found you on the internet. I think what intrigued me the most was that I read you were tubist.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what caught my eye. But then as I read all of your bio, I just want to know everything. So the first thing that you mentioned in an email was that you did a lot of Radio City music hall shows.
Yeah.
What were you doing?
So this is my second year doing it. They do the Christmas Spectacular every year with the Rockettes. So it's about a 7-week period, and there's like 180 shows that happen in that 7-week period.
Wow.
So they have 2 orchestras, 2 like dance crews, a couple Santa Clauses, all that.
Wow.
I feel like if you could kind of compare it to like intensity level of anything, it would be like very close to like a circus.
Wow. Okay.
You know, just like playing. It's a 90-minute show, but you play the whole time, like the whole time. I feel like there's probably like 30 seconds maybe. You can catch a break here and there, but it's the most demanding thing I've ever done, like playing and endurance wise and all that stuff. And last year was the first year I did it. And
this is your first year.
Yeah, well, like the 2022 to 2023. So this was my second year. They do auditions every year, and so the 2022 season, that was the first year I was allowed to audition. They kind of like, they take applications, and then they select applications from that point. So that was my first year auditioning, and I won it. And then they asked me to come back again the next year, so I did that. And yeah, it's a very, very intense thing, but it's a great hang. It's a really cool production. Radio City Music Hall holds like 6,000 people. It's crazy because they do up to 5 shows a day. So there'll be like a 10 a.m., a 1 p.m., a 4 p.m., a 7 p.m., and a 10 p.m. to happen all one day. And it'll be close to like full in the hall, so it's like 5 times 6,000. That's like 1 million people went to this show the 2022 season. And I think they sold even more tickets this season, but I haven't seen like the official metrics, so
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's chaotic. It's great. It's a lot of fun.
How do your chops feel? And did they develop over that time at all?
Oh, big time. Yeah. It's kind of funny because I actually feel like my body wore out before my chops did. Just like simply holding bass trombone for that long, which I've never had issues with that. I've never even second thought about it, but I've actually never played anything that is that much like an hour and a half consistent playing, and then you only have like a little less than an hour and a half before the next show. So the most I've ever done in one day is 3 shows, but just simply holding up the horn that long, like my left arm would just really I really had it. I lifted weights in between like the first season and the second season, and it did help, but it was still a challenge. And of course, chops, that's always a thing because I was also doing other things like outside of it when I could. I sub on some other Broadway shows, like both Chairs at Aladdin and Sweeney Todd.
I saw that.
Yeah,
Sweeney Todd must be an intense show to play.
It is. It's not a ton of playing, actually, which is kind of on the trombone part. But when you do play, it's like, like the challenge with that show is just being able to come in on a cold horn and playing like loud and with a good sound and in tune and all that. Which actually I'm going to be taking over that chair in March through the end of the run. Wow. So I'm excited for that too. But yeah,
that's fantastic.
It's kind of funny because like going to a normal, like a regular Broadway show, even though they're longer, like Aladdin's 2 hours and 20 minutes, Sweeney Todd's like almost a full 3 hours. It's funny that like the 90-minute show like I'd go to a regular Broadway show and it would actually feel like a break in some ways, just because I don't have, like they have more dialogue in those, so you can like set the horn down, kind of chill out for a few minutes in between like playing. And also just like doing the tenor trombone stuff while having the bass trombone like on my face all the time. And but I like experiences like that where you're playing all the time, like you have no choice but to learn how to play very efficiently, otherwise it's just not possible. You're going to blow your chops out.
Yeah.
And actually this year Jen Wharton, great bass trombonist, turned me on to Robinson's Remedies, like the lip balm.
Oh.
Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
She gave it to me, and I was like, yeah, okay. Totally skeptical. Like, there's no magic cream that's gonna. But it actually worked incredibly well. It helped the swelling go down. Yeah, I was really amazed by it.
I need to check that out because usually it's an indication that I haven't been practicing enough. If I go do a 3-hour jazz gig where I'm improvising a lot and feeling the swelling by the third set, I usually tell myself, "Oh, I haven't been practicing enough." Jen is great, and she's a friend with a guy I know named Alan Ferber.
Yeah.
And when I saw your video game, that you're composing music for video, or you're just into
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah.
Well, I like compose is kind of a. I don't fully know if that's the right way. I did the environmental music on there, and that was actually a very interesting process because technically it is composing, but it's not in the way that necessarily that you would think. Basically, because that game takes place in the 1800s, so. There were other little tidbits, but like one of the main things we did, you go into like a theater in the game that's like an old-timey theater, and so like we were supposed to be acting as if we were like the house band. So like they had like circus performers, so they had like a little like quintet type thing, so I was playing like tuba bass, and then they had like drummer, like a cornet, and a piano, like that type of vibe, and they would just be like, okay, like this is what's happening in the game, and we want you to just create something that reflects that, like on the fly. And they would show us the scene of the video game, but it was like kind of funny because they didn't have the graphics filled in because, like it hasn't been released. They don't want us like leaking things. It's okay now that it's out, but like we had to sign an NDA, like not to say anything before it came out and all that. But it was interesting because it actually used like every single skill that I feel like we try and attain as a musician, just like looking at something and being like with a group of people and being like, okay, we have to figure out a vibe for this, like let's come up with a theme, and you have to do it very quickly on the fly, no rehearsal, like the clock is ticking, like, and they want you to do it fast. Like if you're not doing it fast, like that's bad for them because it's hourly pay basically. And so we did things like that, and just like all the little environmental things. So it wasn't like the like soundtrack stuff, but kind of like a lot of the Easter egg things. But it was very interesting to like just see that whole process play out and like how many people actually work on these games in each department. And like even though this was like, I mean, it's a fairly big part of the game, like all the stuff when you're moving around. Like sometimes you don't even really, like the average player probably doesn't even fully think about like, oh, there's music playing right now. Like somebody recorded music for this particular, like I'm walking into this bar and there's like a honky tonk piano playing. Like that was the piano player from our session. Like, I hadn't ever really even as a musician, like playing some games, I hadn't really fully thought about like the scope of all what's involved in every little detail of creating these video game worlds that have gotten like so incredibly intricate over the past few years.
Yeah. My son's really into that game, and he's mentioned how the soundscapes really affect him. He's super aware of music in the background and does some of that himself, and he loves the game, so it caught my eye when I read that in your bio, and also something you said about how you'll be walking down the street and you'll hear a New Orleans street beat while you're walking.
Yeah, or even just like, I mean, especially like New York. I mean, even right now, there's like a siren. I don't know. I don't think you can hear it on the mic.
I can hear it.
But
I can hear it.
yeah, just like stuff like that, and like hearing all these different sounds and thinking about all the jazz musicians that lived here, like jazz music started to make a lot more sense to me when I moved here and felt like that hustle and bustle and like sounds of the subway and just like crowd feet and like chatter and things like that. And especially like some of the more like frenetic jazz sounds you hear, especially like the bop stuff, is like it's kind of hard to explain. It's just like one of those things I recommend like any jazz musician try and get to New York and just experience what it's like being in a major city that's so busy like that, and just like thinking about like the mindset of some of those jazz artists that, you know, came up in New York and or like moved to New York and were influenced by the things going on here. It's just it's given me a different understanding and also like inspired me to think more like in a musical context. And yeah, like the Red Dead Redemption 2 is like, I mean, like what is the point? Not like point, I don't know, like what is a point, not the point, but a point of music could potentially be, you know, a soundtrack for life. And that's kind of what it feels like when I am in the city and I think about like the jazz music I listen to. It just kind of seems like a soundtrack of life in a way. So I've tried to like challenge myself to kind of like look at things and be like, if that was a song, like what would it sound like, type of thing.
Yeah, that's really cool. What kind of jazz do you listen to?
I mean, I listen to everything.
What are some of your favorite things that pop?
I mean, I love Coltrane. I love Gil Evans. The Gil Evans stuff is just like amazing to me. I'm a big Jimmy Knepper fan.
Really?
Jimmy Knepper, and I'm really into Brazilian jazz as well. I also like do a little bit with the Mingus Big Band, and that kind of like got me like. Well, I mean, obviously I listened to Mingus, a lot of Mingus's albums and stuff like that, and Jimmy Knepper like always really stood out to me. And then I've been, you know, I get to play with the Mingus Band here every once in a while. I'll be there, I think the 19th, February 19th. And I'm always just kind of like thinking about Jimmy Knepper when I play with the Mingus Big Band, even though I'm usually playing the bass trombone chair and he's a tenor trombone player. I just like, I really think his soloing really kind of encapsulated that music a lot, and I really dig that. And there's a great album that is like kind of my go-to when I just want to like chill out, like, and not have something so frenetic, and that's an album called Stoneflower that Jobim, it's a Jobim album, and trombone is like one of the main features on there. There's no other like horn players really. I think there's a little bit of French horn on there actually.
Really?
Yeah, and Irby Green is the trombonist, so like that's another like pivotal album for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Jimmy Knepper, Irby Green. I mean, of course JJ, and you know, but yeah, I definitely like gravitate toward that a lot.
That's neat. Yeah, Jimmy Knepper has character. Even though JJ is like so clean and so smooth, and I love his playing, but I do gravitate more to something less polished, and I like Jimmy Knepper for that reason.
Yeah,
sure.
And like that's why I kind of like associate it with like him with Mingus a little bit. Like that Mingus vibe is just like it's its own entity, and even playing. I played with like a lot of the ghost bands, and that one just has such a separate vibe, like from the others. Just in that it's just like it's still like Mingus has always just been his own planet, you know. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. The first Jimmy Knepper I heard was on a Benny Wallace album, and they were playing Skippy by Thelonious Monk, and it just blew my mind. I had never heard anything like that, and that's what I wanted to play and what I wanted to listen to. You know, just really daring, playing, really adventurous and hard to predict, I guess.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
really cool. So you play a lot of bass trombone then, and when you mentioned your left arm, I've also had issues with just holding up the trombone for a long time. And then you said you lifted weights. How did you approach that, building strength in your left arm, uh, you know, to be able to, do that heavy lifting?
Well, I think there's a few things because it's kind of interesting actually. Like at one point I was having problems because I do play a lot of tenor trombone. It's kind of like 50-50. Um, and like when I would switch to tenor trombone, like one thing I would do too is like grip the horn too hard because like the weight difference, like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm not holding, like I have like 5 to 10 pounds less. Like I don't have to grip it so hard. But like in general too is just, and going along with the efficiency thing is finding a way to relax your body in a tense situation. Um, because if there's any tension whatsoever, that also is just going to make things a lot harder. And it's really hard to do that, especially in a performance setting.
Why is that? Tell us what you mean. I think I know, but
Yeah.
in case anyone out there listening or watching this also has trouble with that or relaxing and tension, I'm just curious what you mean and what you do about it.
Yeah, I actually just had a young musician just talk to me about like beta blockers, you know. Like I always had a lot of performance anxiety, like going back from high school. I loved playing and I loved practice, but I hated performances, which is funny because it's the backwards for most people. And now I'm also like, I make all my living off of performing pretty much. I do a little bit of teaching, but like the meat and potatoes is performing for me, and it has been for like 10 years now. And so like when I first moved to New York, um, like one of the first big opportunities that I got within the first year was subbing on the show Wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of like physical manifestations of anxiety and that, and just like, you know, having opportunities like that where it's like, oh, if I like mess this up, this is not good, you know. So like I would like my body would shake, my arm would shake. So I did take beta blockers a few times. They're like, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's just like a very low dose of a blood pressure medication is basically what it is, and it did alleviate those physical symptoms. I It just like made me feel a little like, I don't, like cloudy is a little bit of an exaggeration. It wasn't like a major. It's not like a drug, you know. It's just a very like minor thing, and a lot of people performers use them. But for me, I only had to use them a couple times, and like once I felt comfortable and I was like, okay, I can do this. Like you just need to chill out. And eventually, like I would stress myself out so much about like impending gigs and things like that that I just got so tired, like physically and mentally tired of being stressed like all the time, that eventually it just kind of evened out. But I mean, I also like had a lot of, I perform like a lot, and like not everybody performs a lot. So that's kind of a luxury that I have, like living in a city where there's like always stuff going on. That you know, my situation is a little bit different than somebody who like has a major performance maybe like once or twice a month or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of like practice, like tamping down on anxiety, and also just like, I mean, the stakes are high. Like if I don't deliver, like I'm not gonna make money. I'm gonna have to do something else. So like, especially in that early part of my career, is like, you know, if I don't play well and people don't like the way I play, I'm not gonna get called, and I'm just gonna like get phased out. And really like paying rent depended on it. So you kind of straighten up real fast when you're in a situation like that. Um, so uh, like one thing I also said to this young musician is like making some really bad mistakes also like kind of cured my anxiety because like you go on a gig and you play like a real nasty note early on and it's like, oh well, that's already happened, so anything else is like, and like just like just like messing up a few times, doing a few embarrassing things, like for some reason it helped me a lot. Like not like I wasn't like trying to do it, but it was kind of like, oh well, like that horrible thing happened, and then you realize like, oh, if I make like one mistake, like the world's not gonna end. And you hear like some legendary players like crack notes and make some pretty like jump in a hole. It doesn't. The thing is that like, especially with Broadway shows, I mean, you're playing 9 shows a week, like nobody like and people always make the joke, oh, the elusive perfect show. Like you're never gonna play a perfect show. Like when I got into Wicked, the tenor trombonist Dale Kirkland, he was like, you're never gonna play a perfect show. Like it's just nobody ever plays a perfect show. With that said, like there are certain parts of Broadway shows that like you have to play this part perfect every time because it's super exposed, like that type of thing. But you know, like not everybody plays perfect all the time, but there has to be like a certain level of consistency. Not to say that like people are chipping notes all the time, but like it's gonna happen. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. You just have to know how to relax your body and not freak out. And it's like how you recover from that is such a difference maker, because sometimes like you can get in your head if you make a mistake and then just like it can all go really downhill from there. So just learning how to cope with these emotions and nerves and being able to calm yourself down, and also just knowing like if I tense up, if I don't go for this, like it's not going to happen. Like if I go for it, at least there's a chance that it's going to come out correctly, but if I go into this like timidly, it's just not going to happen. So like you might as well go for it, and if
create
it doesn't
possibilities.
Yeah, for sure.
But you knew in high school that did you know what it was called when you had anxiety, or so like for me, I had anxiety, but I didn't. I'm 58 years old, so when I was 18, 40 years ago, excuse me, we weren't really talking about mental health so much. There was no social media. There weren't people posting about all the time what they're going through. So growing up in the 1970s and 1980s for me was, well, I had some feeling, and I don't know what it is, so I guess I better smoke some pot before I go. And then walking away, I would think, well, I just made that much harder for myself by smoking pot. So until I got clean and sober 10 years ago, I spent 20, 30 years not really being aware of what I was trying to control with drugs and alcohol. I think young people now, and maybe even at your time in high school, were you aware of what you were experiencing?
Actually, no, I don't. That's an interesting question. I've never been asked that. I've never really thought about it, but I mean, like, yes and no. When I was in high school was kind of like the flip phone era, so it wasn't like quite like the same thing that people are experiencing now. I was right in that gap, and then like when I was in college is kind of when like Facebook came out and stuff like that. I guess there was MySpace, but yeah, like that was like a little bit of a different thing. We were more concerned with like who's in your top 8, like what friends are in your top 8. Like that was like the extent of social media. It's so silly. But yeah, like I definitely recognized that that I had more like anxiety around performing than a lot of my peers. I don't think I thought about and I think if I would have thought about why, that might have been a little bit more helpful. But for some reason, I never thought to ask the question, why am I experiencing this, and how can I fix it? So yeah,
I think I have to mention this book that my friend Dan Brubright has written called Musician's Dilemma. It's been a life-changing book for me. Um, and a lot of what he talks about in the book are tools to deal with a lot of these mental situations. Um, you went to Berkeley. I can't imagine they were teaching classes on how to relax, or maybe they were.
Actually, do you know Effortless Mastery?
No.
Okay, Effortless Mastery is another book
Okay.
that kind of deals with this, and that was like the book over at Berkeley. I didn't start at Berkeley either.
Oh, you didn't?
I started at the University of Texas San Antonio doing chemistry.
Oh, really?
So yeah, and then
what took you into chemistry and then took you out of chemistry?
like I knew I always wanted to do something with music, and my first like inclination was like, well, I could never like play trombone for a living. That doesn't make sense. Who does that? So I'm gonna like do something useful or whatever. So I was eventually like wanting to look into like neurology and like the effects of music on the brain from like a technical standpoint. So I was like, I think chemistry is a good kind of like way to start that path. And I was also like good at it and like was doing the AP stuff and like tested into a higher level like going in. And I got through like the first year and I realized like, man, all I want to do is like go play my horn and like, I was doing like music on the side. And then I began to realize like, if I want to do this music thing, like now's the time to try it. And if I fail at that, like I can always go back to doing the science stuff, but like it's a lot harder to do it vice versa. Like, people are a lot more forgiving of stupid mistakes when you're a younger musician. But if like you go in as like older, like people perceive you differently and think like, oh, well, you should have this all worked out because you're like 30 or 40 years old or whatever. Is it fair? No, but that's just how it is. So I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this performance thing. And I realized if I tried to do both, like there's just not enough time in the day to dedicate like what I needed to dedicate to both things. And then I also knew that school was not the right school if I really wanted to do it. It's more of like a music ed school. It's not really like a performance school. I was like, if I want to like perform, I need to go to a place with like performance opportunities. And I ended up getting like a nice scholarship to Berkeley, and so I transferred in there, and I went there for like 2.5 years. I finished my degree. It worked out well actually because I got all my like regular like science and math and English, like all those credits done at University of Texas San Antonio. So when I got to Berkeley, I was able to take all music classes. I didn't have to take like the Common Core classes, which like if anyone's like considering like doing a music degree, it's a very smart way to do it actually. Like it saves a lot of money.
Yeah.
Even though I had a nice scholarship, it was still expensive. Like these schools are very expensive. So, and then I just moved to New York and started freelancing. And I was like, if I'm not working, I'm going to go back to school. But I was working, so I didn't go back to school.
Yeah. Did you know someone at Berkeley? Did you just choose to investigate Berkeley and audition, and then you got in?
I'd heard about it, like from some local musicians on the scene there in San Antonio, and I was like kind of delving into it. And honestly, that was the only place I applied. Like I didn't have much guidance or know much, and I was just like, I'm just gonna apply here, and if I don't get in, I don't get in. And I got in, and I had a scholarship, and I actually like, I feel like I got in on like a little mantra I think about like when I tell people like that are trying to do music is like find a niche, find somewhere that is lacking that you could feel like you could fit in. So for me, like I actually didn't really start playing jazz until I was at college. Like I mean I did a little bit in high school, but it wasn't my main focus. I was doing like a lot of classical stuff. Like when I was in high school, I entered like the Houston Symphony Youth Concerto competition, and I made the finals for that, which like I had no idea like what that even meant. And then I showed up and it was all like piano players and violin players that have been playing since they were really young, and they were like, oh, we think you're like the first trombone player we've ever had in the finals. And that was like a big like eye-opening moment for me to realize that like, oh, music isn't just like all state, which is like really big in certain places. And so anyway, I when I went to do my Berkeley audition, I actually played a concerto for my audition piece, like, and they were actually looking for classical players that had like really good fundamentals, and like they were trying to like fill out their orchestral program a little bit. So that I think that kind of gave me a little bit of an edge when you wouldn't necessarily think that would be an edge going to a school like Berkeley, because they had plenty of people that could like improvise, but maybe their fundamentals weren't as strong type of situation. And then from there, like I was able to kind of, I started playing jazz and like working really hard at it. And I was also able to kind of like cross over a little bit. And this was before Boston Conservatory and Berkeley are now like merged entities.
Okay.
They weren't back then, but I was able to kind of go to the Boston Conservatory. Like they needed, I started playing bass trombone in college as well. I was only doing like tenor trombone before. So like, they had like a 5-week summer classical program over there with Triton Brass, and they had no bass trombone players, but they knew I was next door in Berkeley, and so like I got to do that program for free because they needed somebody.
Nice.
So that like I kind of started playing bass trombone as like to fit into a niche of like an area that I saw there was need for it, and then I fell in love with the instrument.
Yeah.
And then like tuba as well. I started playing tuba as well because I saw a need for it. Like. Yeah. And that has gotten me, playing tuba has gotten me my coolest gigs ever.
Really?
Actually.
How did you learn valves? I mean, was the idea of valves has been insurmountable for me. I just can't figure it out and can't make my fingers do what I want them to do.
Yeah.
Was that hard?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a challenge too, for sure, but I play B flat tuba. I don't mess with the C, E flat. I don't mess with any of that stuff because then I just think about slide positions in like the valve, like anything that's open is first position, anything that's second valve is second position, anything that's third valve is like first position. And then same goes with like alternate positions, so you just kind of I just like associate those, and I think it like playing B flat has made it easier, and I've never needed anything beyond like a B flat. Like I'm not gonna go play tuba in the New York Phil, like but for like what I do, a B flat has been great, and there's a lot of guys play B flat over here.
And valve trombone, is that something you've ever done?
I've actually never played a valve trombone. I mean, and I play euphonium, but I've never actually even I've never played one at all. Like. I mean, I'm not like opposed to it or anything. It just like I've had enough to juggle, and I'm looking at like how can I make money, and there's not many valve trombone gigs.
Yeah, you need another instrument in your arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, so if I found one and someone wanted to give me one, sure. But at this point, I'm just trying to like keep up. Always trying to keep up with the doubles because, like that was one of the things that really helped me is being always ready for anything on any instrument, like last minute calls. That like when I first started out, like a lot of the opportunities I got were because like they needed somebody like immediately, like can you come do this in the next like hour type of situation. So like that was a great incentive to keep practicing, because it's like even though I don't have anything coming up, like something could come up very quickly and I need to be ready for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have an agent that's looking for work for you, or are you just doing all that yourself?
No, I don't really know anyone with that. I guess there's maybe a few people that might like have one. I think that might be more like people like does Aubrey Logan have one? Like, cause she's like her own like solo artist, like selling out, bigger venues. I'm kind of more of a side person at this point. Although I am recording an album in August. I've done a lot of like, it's like side work. So it's pretty much just like word of mouth, which is why like, it's so important to be ready for whatever's going to come your way, and making sure that you know what to say yes to and what to say no to, that type of thing.
And you live in Manhattan?
Yeah, I'm in East Harlem.
Is it hard to like practice in your apartment?
I've been really lucky. I've never had a complaint anywhere. I mean, I also live in I lived in Washington Heights before and East Harlem, and these are they're a little bit different area than if I was living in the Upper East Side, or
How is it different? How are they different?
it's not as expensive, so I mean, I feel like if I was living in an apartment where everyone paid millions of dollars for their apartment, they might care more. But everyone around here is really chill. There's a great culture of music. People really appreciate music. In New York City, for the most part, I've heard a few horror stories with people having neighbors having issues, but I've luckily never had an issue, and I play really loud sometimes.
Really?
And I'm just well, if someone has a problem, I guess they can come talk to me. Because technically, it is legal. If you do it within reasonable hours, I think it's 10 to 10. I mean, people can try and get mad at you and intimidate you, but as far as the law goes, it's legal. Yeah. So.
So, do you have time to go out and see music yourself?
Yeah.
Or do you do that? I would think with your working schedule, maybe you don't have enough time.
It depends. Yeah, it comes in waves. There's time. When I was doing Radio City, I had no time for anything. And then I was also doing other things on top of that. So any free time I had, I had other stuff going on, or I had to prepare. In the middle of doing that season, I did a recording that my friend, he works at the City College of New York. He put together an octet that re-recorded all the David Brubeck octet stuff, which I didn't even realize that David Brubeck had an octet before this project. Which I actually feel like a lot of people don't realize he had an octet.
No, I don't think I knew that.
Okay, yeah, because even people in New York, I say that they're he had an octet. I'm yeah, actually. But that's why it's kind of such a cool project, because a lot of that music hasn't been played in 50 plus years, and it's really cool music. But and that's all on tenor trombone, and it's a saxophone players wrote this music, so it's all these crazy bebop lines. So
harmonized bop lines and stuff.
Yeah, I had to really shed a lot when I wasn't at Radio City. So I really didn't, that type of stuff. I had no time. But I've been trying to go out. I try and go out as much as I can when I do, because that's kind of part of the point of living in New York City, and just trying to get better and hearing what other people are doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah.
So I take that stuff really seriously, and I do like to go out and hear stuff. Sometimes I'll have to live stream something, but I know it's kind of the conundrum of living in New York, being so busy and just trying to find time, but it's also why do I live here?
Yeah.
It's for that type of stuff too. So yeah, I'm always trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you approach shedding a complicated bop line? What's the first thing, second thing, third thing you do to approach something that you can't play yet? How do you start?
Well, I'm always on just a fundamental level. I'm always trying to push the limits of what I'm doing when I'm working on fundamentals, and kind of, or sometimes double dipping, using whatever music I'm trying to do, and just making sure I'm thinking about it in as a fundamental. So yeah, this particular session had some really fast lines that I had to kind of shed, but part of that was just listening to the recording and kind of singing it back, and thinking about the rhythmic flow of it, and maybe not trying to get at first of course play it slow, right? But when you get beyond the play it slow and you're trying to break that precipice between where it is happening and where it's not happening, is pushing yourself to play the line at the tempo that it's supposed to be, but actually being okay with not hitting every single note perfectly, because you have to think about the gesture of the line, especially with bebop. Obviously you do want it to be clean, but there's also groove is such an important, in some ways can be more important than the notes, just like being in the rhythmic pocket and and being in the rhythmic pocket and like getting the right like inflections type of thing.
Yeah, the style and stuff.
And also just like what the other thing I had to do was work on relaxing my body as well, because the faster and faster like some of the stuff was, I was like, okay, like of course, like I think the thing most people have an issue with is like you start the line and it starts coming out, but then the further you get into these lines, it's like your body starts to tense up more and it gets like more sluggish. And I just like, I have to say, I don't know how else to put this, but like sitting next to someone like, do you know who Scott Robinson is?
Oh, no.
Extraordinaire. Scott's like absolutely legendary. He plays every instrument.
Okay.
I did the first gig I ever did with him. He was playing the Off the Clyde.
What is that?
Yeah, exactly. It's a historical like brass instrument. It's basically like a bassoon with a brass mouthpiece. It's very strange. He also has like an album on bass sax.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But this guy's amazing. He like I also met him through the like the Mingus band and stuff. But absolute legend, and like Brandon Lee, great trumpet player. Sitting next to those guys, they're just absolute masters of their instruments. So I'd be playing these lines with them, and so I just feel like when you're in that situation and you hear that next to you, you either have to like just be like, okay, like you just have to do this, like, and it just yeah, it just kind of happens. But like the reason why it just kind of happens is also like the preparation that I put in and like the fundamentals, working on tonguing, working on tone, working on like scales and stuff like that, all of that stuff. So like I honestly like didn't practice that music a ton, even though it was very hard. Like I had a solid fundamental toolbox in which to pull that from, and then also like latching on, using your ears to latch on to the person next to you. We don't always have that luxury, right? Like sometimes the people we're sitting next to are also struggling as equally as we are, you know, or like, you know, so like that, like sitting next to great players and playing with great players, like there's just no substitute for that. And, you know, it's hard to get that everywhere. Like that's, I mean, that's why I moved to New York too. I mean, there's great players everywhere, but you might not have the opportunity to sit next to them because like I found in smaller cities, like there's a core group of really great players and they're so busy all the time, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just...
Where did you grow up?
Houston.
And did you sit with other trombonists when you were a kid?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I really didn't take lessons either. I just like thought it was like this fun thing, and I just I mean I lived in a suburb outside of Houston. Houston's such a massive place. Like I was like 45 minutes to an hour from downtown, so like going downtown on top of like being busy. I had a brother as well who played football. Like I mean like going downtown to hear music wasn't even a thought like in my head. And I mean like I did like region jazz and like region band, and I did get a like there's a cat, Bruce Melville. He was my region like jazz guy, and he's a great trombonist, and that was like one of a very cool like situation. But yeah, I didn't do a ton like in the music scene down there.
Did you play in school band when you were a kid?
Yeah, like that's pretty much middle school, high school was like yeah. I mean it was a great, like Texas has really good music program going on. Like they have a strong music thing happening, but just the focus was all like region band and like region jazz, which, you know, in this stage of my life, I'm not really like a huge fan of doing things that way. And like you get some great skills out of it, but I think like, you know, like doing that Houston Symphony Youth Concerto competition was so much, it contributed to my musical development way more than like doing the region band, region jazz thing did. Preparing like an actual piece of music, like you know, rather than like an etude and just obsessing over an etude for a couple of months, you know. Yeah.
Did you choose trombone, or did the conductor or the band instructor need a trombonist?
So funny. I really wanted to play the saxophone, and so I had no backup plan. But like you know, they don't let everybody choose what they want because they need everyone to play saxophone. So basically what they did is they put your name in a drum, like, and they just did like a raffle style, like who gets the saxophone, and I did not get chosen for saxophone. And I just thought, like, it's fate. I'm going to play saxophone. I'm going to get it. They're going to draw my name. Like, no, back at 6th grade, you know, like.
Oh, no.
And then I was so, like, heartbroken that I didn't get chosen for saxophone. I was like, well, what's the most ridiculous instrument I could play? And
the trombone, of course.
Yeah, so I chose the trombone, and now I make the joke. Now my life is a joke, but it worked out, you know.
But you're good at the punchline.
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny, like, origin story. It's not the, like, but I actually I did. This is kind of funny. I found this book, like, you know how, like, in preschool the teacher has you, like, draw something and it's always just, like, scribble and circle, and then they'll write above, like, what it's supposed to be.
What it is.
And I found this thing from when I was in preschool, and it said, I loved going to the parade. The trombones were my favorite.
Oh,
so I was like, I guess it was in there somewhere. Like,
it is.
Yeah,
it's in there somewhere then. Yeah, it is a, like, the look of the trombone is really cool.
Especially in a parade.
Sticks out in a parade.
Yeah, it's like front line, like,
right.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, started when you were a kid, high school, college was chemistry until you switched over, and then you went to Berkeley.
Yeah.
And during your time at Berkeley, were you already thinking about going to New York when you were done, or was that just what you came up with when you were done?
No, I mean, not initially. I mean, moving from a place like Texas to Boston was, like, a very big culture shift, weather shift. I thought I could just, like, wear a hoodie and, like, it would be fine. And my dad was like, no, you need, like, a real jacket.
Right.
He was right. But yeah, like, and so, like, that was a big shift for me, and just, like, living in a city. I lived close to the school, like, right by Fenway Park. So, like, that just kind of took me time, and it didn't really become that clear to me. I think, like, after maybe, like, a year and a half, I went to New York, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, well, maybe I'll move there, you know, like, to sound cool, but really on the inside it was like, oh my god, what is going on with this place? This is insane, like, and I just kind of talked about it, and then when it came time to do it, I was like, oh, I guess I have to do it, like, you know, because I, like, talked a big game about doing it just because it was, like, the cool thing to do.
Yeah. So you talked your way into new behavior, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Said it enough times, and then you had to make it happen.
Yeah, that's honestly, like, I'll admit it. Yeah, that's what it was. Like, I wasn't, like, you know, and then I just kind of, like, moved there, and, like, before I moved there, I was, like, going there, and I started talking to some people. One of the people I got in touch with that was, like, that really helped me was Douglas Purviance. And he gave me my shot at Wicked, and so I subbed over there for years, and that kind of, like, helped get the ball rolling, because people were like, oh, Doug has you subbing for him, so I'll give you a shot. And then, like I said, just always being around, and at that time I was going to every single concert that I could go to, and just, like, meeting people, and like, looking things up about them, and just trying to learn about, like, the music. And it wasn't like, oh, I want a gig, you know, like, it was just genuinely trying to become a better musician, go out and hear these things, support the music, and, like, learn about what's happening. And from that, people would be like, oh, you know, like, sometimes I do need a last minute sub, and so they'd get my name and number, because more established players would be busy, so it's kind of like, okay. And so that's kind of how I did it. You know, a lot of people go to school in New York, and, like, that's how that kind of happens for them. But I feel like, you know, just living in New York City was kind of, like, more invaluable than anything. I was like, that was my grad degree, just, you know, doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm so glad that it's worked out for you. It's been 10 years, right? And
yeah.
And you've been working the whole time.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to not have to get another job.
Even during COVID?
Well, COVID was a little bit weird. I was in Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know Ron Wilkins at all?
No. That name sounds familiar, actually.
Yeah, he's, like, But anyway, like he got very sick with COVID in Texas. He was on tour doing Aladdin and like blah 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 blah. Like very long story, but I was helping him. He is like, I think he's like the best trombone player ever.
Okay.
And he was on a ventilator for a month and made a full recovery and is back to playing things I could only dream of playing. So that's been a really interesting thing, and like watching his process of being able to like become so strong again after like such a devastating, you know,
Yeah.
illness. And that's like really a testament to his like methods and the way that he approaches the horn and his efficiency. And like, because I mean, like when you're on a ventilator, they paralyze your whole body.
That's
So
incredible.
he was like completely paralyzed for over a month. Like his whole body, like you have to learn how to walk, talk, eat, you know, all the things. And I don't know. That's just like kind of mind blowing that he's able to do everything that he's able to do.
That's incredible.
Before or after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like with the exception of that, like I did work at like a call center, like for cookie deliveries. And I was like, I will never ever complain about being on a shitty gig ever again.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, you know, I did that for a couple of months, and then I was able to move back to New York right after that, and things just kind of worked out from there. I started subbing at Aladdin, and then like I'd been working with Lenny Pickett before the pandemic. He had like put a group together. Do you know who Lenny Pickett is?
Mm-mm.
He's the musical director of Saturday Night Live. So like when you hear the theme song, like that's Lenny Pickett.
Wow.
And he also like has an extensive history. He's great.
Yeah.
So like yeah, so I'm back. I started subbing on Funny Girl, and also both chairs, the tenor trombone and bass trombone chair at Aladdin. And then like Lenny also called me. I got to do the Saturday Night Live house band once,
Cool.
which was very cool.
Yeah, not bad.
You know, I think I'm like the first new sub in like 20 years because that gig doesn't get subbed out very often.
Steve Turre played for so long.
Yeah, I mean he's still there.
Does it really? Wow.
Yeah, he's still there.
Wow.
So he doesn't sub out much, but you know, I mean the gig doesn't happen like it's not like a Broadway show that happens 9 times a week. Like you know, like Saturday Night Live's a little different. It's like once, and it is truly live.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then and then I won the Radio City audition, and then just things have been.
So next is Sweeney Todd.
Yeah.
And that'll be, you said to the end of the run. When is that?
As of now, it's like in May, but I mean, it's always possible that they could extend it. Like they have a new cast coming in, so I think it just kind of depends on if the new cast wants to stay longer, if the producers feel like they're selling enough tickets to extend it, which is kind of hard to know. And that's like one of the things about, you know, being a Broadway musician on that scene is like, you know, you kind of never know how long the run's going to be.
So if someone calls and they want you in June, you can say what, like maybe?
Well, I mean, it depends on what it is. Yeah. I like if there was a new show opening and they wanted me to do that, like, I mean, the person I'm taking over for, you know, is leaving for a new show because it's like, okay, this other show is probably going to wind down and close, as shows do. Yeah. So it's like you can always leave and go to a different show, and like you're not like married to it. So that's kind of the nice thing. You can even like take leave and stuff like that, which is cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the time, and I want to be respectful of your time, and I also don't know if the system will turn me off at a certain time. So.
Oh yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about to all your fans out there, or to young players who might be trying to learn, or you know, is there any parting advice?
I'm not totally sure. I would say like if I was like a young person like going into college and like I was really interested in jazz, I would say don't rule out going to like a public school in New York City. Like if I were to do things all over again, I would go to like one of these schools in the CUNY system, City University of New York. So like there's a city college in Harlem, and they have some of the same staff that like MSM has. Even like,
Wow.
you know, they'll bring in people from Juilliard. Like, I mean, you get a very good education for a fraction of the price. And the thing is that like living in New York City, you have access to amazing performances happening all the time. You're not just limited to whoever your college is bringing in, and you can also take private lessons with whoever you want. So I always like tell people interested in majoring in music, like, and then also like if you want to be a performer, like, you can learn great things in school, but a lot of that is learned outside of school. And I would suggest looking into maybe getting a degree like sound engineering. I do a lot of at home like home recording, and I was doing that like before the pandemic, and I learned to do a lot of that stuff at Berkeley. I didn't get a performance degree. I got like it's called professional music, but the reason why I liked the degree is because I was able to take like the intro classes to any major. So like if like intro to composition or something, like that's only open to composition majors. But as a professional music degree, I was able to take some of these, like you can only take this as like a sound engineering degree. So I was able to get like the intro and figure out how to learn these things on my own.
Wow.
And develop from there. And just like keeping things open and thinking about like commercial viability, and like maybe if you're like, I really want to be in an orchestra, just maybe consider other options as well, and just like becoming as well-rounded as you can, and thinking about like the infrastructure needed to get these skills, like sound engineering as well. Like it's harder to do that on your own without like an infrastructure. Like in school, like they have a studio that you can use, they have expensive gear. Versus like a performance degree, you can go pay somebody $100 for a lesson and get a lot out of it, rather than paying like $60,000 a year for. So that's like kind of like my advice. And like, you know, you can be a musician, and there's like smart ways to do it. Don't think you have to like spend a ton of money on schooling, and that's going to be like the only like way to do that. Yeah.
That's good advice for those of us at any step of our development. Always try to be well-rounded and think of the infrastructure needed to, you know, to learn, and that's really good stuff.
Yeah.
I appreciate you giving me the time today. I really know it's probably weird for someone to reach out and say, hey, can I interview you? But
no, it was great. It was very cool, and I looked up your projects and what you're doing, and it's very cool. And I'm just like, I'm thrilled that you reached out, and I'm glad that we got to meet, and now we're friends. And
yeah. I want to come see you play sometime. My wife and I are considering a trip to New York sometime, maybe early summer. So
yeah, it's a great time to come. Very like great weather, like early summers. Yeah, lots of plants, lots of parks. It's a great vibe. Let me know, give me a call, and like
I'm trying to get Hardbop Messengers out there to do some playing too. So who knows?
Yeah,
maybe I'll be asking you to help you promote.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, give me a call anytime. Yeah, I'm happy to.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Becca. It's been great.
Awesome.
And I'll be posting this today. So
very cool. Awesome. Great.
Cool. All right. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Bye.